Hello, and welcome to Cosmic Dream Sanctuary. This is a presentation on the series Finding Missing Time. This presentation is called Stigma and Stigmata, the mysterious marks on the body connected with UAP and non-human intelligence missing time. This presentation is by me, Daniel Rekshan. I hold a bachelor's degree in the Western Liberal Arts from St. John's College, a master's degree in East-West Psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies, a certificate in hypnotherapy in the spiritual counseling modality of depth hypnosis, a certificate in Beyond Quantum Healing, and I'm ordained as a minister in the Universal Life Church. So the overview of the presentation is as follows. We will cover some definitions about missing time, stigma, stigmata, what we're actually talking about, why we're talking about it. I'll describe the phenomenology associated with these marks on the body, and missing time. We will cover examples of these mysterious marks on the body and then look at some non-mysterious marks on the body that are interesting medical phenomena in general, but not necessarily associated with missing time. And then finally, we'll cover the quantum dreaming hypothesis of missing time and hypnosis. So why is this important? Well, the mysterious marks on the body, such as scoop marks, triangle marks, dots, that sort of thing, scars, unexplained scars, these have all been used as proof or evidence for the alien abduction narrative. It's okay that it is used in that context, primarily when the experiencer feels that the marks on the body are representative of this phenomenon. But making a deduction that these marks on the body are evidence for genetic harvest, alien abduction narrative is, I believe, a too great of leap to make without other evidence or other testimony. And I'll go through why in this presentation. I'm not a skeptic regarding alien abduction. I'm just saying that our narrative and our discussion around what this is and how this evidence, if it is evidence, relates to the phenomena. So there may be another mechanism than a physical procedure in some cases. So this is really important to understand that there may be another causal mechanism associated with these marks on the body than a physical procedure. And so oftentimes we say, hey, there's a mark on the body. It had to have come from someone doing something physically in a historic objective space-time. And therefore, the aliens came to me at night, wiped my memories after they performed a procedure and left this evidence, right? So that is a worldview assumption that we are challenging here in this series. These things could actually contain messages, like crop circles contain messages or other channeled material. So this phenomenon may actually not be an artifact of a poorly performed objective and historic medical procedure. Rather, they might be expressions of deeper wisdom or knowledge or intelligence or connection or something like that that we are seeing in the geometries of crop circles. So we may actually want to start investigating some of these phenomena as if they were messages as opposed to artifacts of poorly performed medical procedures. So it's really important to know that this requires significant integration processes to work with. So, but it is beneficial work. So one of the things, this is a very terrifying topic that aliens could come at night, perform procedures, wipe your memory, and leave these marks on the body as evidence. Ooh, that's creepy, sort of thing. So it requires significant work from anyone because of these large media narratives around abduction. It requires everyone to do significant work to even talk or think about these things. So thank you for doing that. But we find that when we work with these experiences more and more, they lead to an understanding or a worldview that brings you in connection with the earth and increases your spiritual capacities and your kindness and empathy. So it's really worthwhile to go through this process of confronting some of the more nightmarish aspects of the alien abduction narratives. Finally, it's important to talk about because irony is meaningful. And so I find it's really ironic that the UAP Congressional Hearing focused on removing the stigma of pilots reporting UAPs, right? So they're removing the stigma associated with pilots reporting UAPs, especially in connection with sensor data. So they're really focused on sensor data. They want to, it seems they're rejecting all this anecdotal and narrative data from the public inquiry around UAPs because, again, there's a stigma associated with it. And one of the things that it's just important to know is stigma is a mark on the body. It's associated with stigmata. There's a strong correlation between the wordplay of this, like removing the stigma, marks on the body. And so I feel it's an important investigation to go on, or an inquiry to go on, is what are these marks on the body? How do they add credibility or testimony or evidence to these different hypotheses? All right, so there are some trigger warnings. And it is a traumatic subject matter. For many people, they are associated with the alien abduction narrative. So they're offering this as testimony, as evidence of proof that their understanding that alien beings came and took their bodies at night to some other location, performed unknown medical procedures on them, and then returned their bodies for some reason, left these marks on the body either as an artifact of a poorly performed medical experiment or as a creepy message. So this is where a lot of our understanding about marks on the body comes from, is people who are associated with this alien abduction narrative. And so I'm offering a slightly different hypothesis, although my hypothesis relies upon the mutual enactment hypothesis put forward by Sean Esborn Hargens, where it says, hey, a lot of there's 10 different major theories related to these the phenomena. All of them can be true, and they can be mutually enacting. So I'm not saying that alien abduction doesn't happen. I'm just saying that that is one component of a larger picture we need to look at, and in that way, it can be very traumatic. This topic also involves pictures of body marks. So these are mysterious marks on the body, also scratches, bruises, bites. In the list of things that are not mysterious marks are included things like herpes sores, bed bug bites. So if you get creeped out by that sort of stuff, I would invite you, when we get to those times, to sort of not look at the video, but listen to the voice or something like that. We'll also discuss some mysterious surgical procedures associated with alien abduction, so this might be triggering to you. This has personal resonance for me, primarily because I had abduction-like experiences as a kid. I looked for meaning outside of myself. I looked for an understanding, like how can I account for the experiences I'm going through? And I looked and I read through the library and I said, oh, it's alien abduction. This is the only thing that's very close to it. And then I realized how terrifying it was after watching the sightings and X-Files and all those things that had the sort of vibe of horror show to it. And then also the works of David Jacques and this really negative kind of alien abduction experience or trope that's being put forward just terrified me as a kid, to know that there are these beings that could penetrate the walls, could take my body, could perform actions. I tried to search for marks on my body, actually, as one of the symptoms of the experience, and I found, hey, there were none actually on my body that were unexplained. So I didn't know how to necessarily relate to that phenomena, but it was very, very scary. And this might actually trigger some of these things. Just know I've worked through that fear. I'm not putting forward a negative alien abduction hypothesis as the primary hypothesis. It's just how violating that there are unknown people with super high technology. They perform unknown procedures on you for unknown reasons. They produce physical evidence on your body Like how violating, how interesting. A lot of these marks on the bodies are sort of the thread that you can begin to pull upon the tapestry of imagination that keeps you from actually integrating some of the intuitions and experiences that are associated with it. So what is missing time? Missing time is understood to be an unexplained gap in consciousness, especially related to time. In this discussion, we are specifically focused on missing time associated with UAP or non-human intelligence, not blackout like drinking or other causes. So that's important to know. The archetype for missing time we are understanding to be unremembered sleep and dream experience. So every night we go to bed, we have experiences that are highly strange, that involve magical creatures, that sometimes involve these sorts of medical procedures. And that's just normal dreaming, right? That's understood to be normal dreaming. And we don't remember it, right? So it's only interesting when there is an accompanied mark on the body that's somewhat associated with that strange dreamlike experience. It's normal if there's no mark on the body. It becomes abnormal conspiracy theory when you say, hey, there's this mark on the body that correlated with this strange dream. So that's really what we're talking about. Sometimes there are experiences of missing time in the day that are associated with these marks on the body. There's also consciously remembered alien contact experience that really do involve conscious memory of being on craft, of relating to these extraterrestrial beings that do produce these marks on the body. So that's really important to understand too, is we are dealing with a kind of complex phenomenon. So that's missing time. So what is stigma? So it is from the ancient Greek word stigma, meaning a brand. It comes from the word stizo, I mark, meaning I mark. Some of the meanings are a mark of infamy or disgrace, scar or birthmark. It's an outward sign or indication. A stigma is the sticky part of a flower that receives pollen during pollination. So isn't that interesting? So we're playing with words here because there's meaning in that. So we might understand all of these things to be a stigma, and so understanding that it can receive pollen during pollination. That's one of the cases that I've worked with the red grid mark, understood this to be a sort of crystallization or catalyzation point for higher frequency energies into the earth. So it's a sticky part of the flower that receives pollen during pollination, or it's a visible sign or characteristic of a disease. So these are all different words of stigma. There's definitely a negative bent towards this. I wanted to talk about stigmata primarily because it is related and it is an example of a mysterious mark on the body received during an ecstatic state of consciousness. And so that's very, very similar to the missing time experience we understand to exist in some sort of transcendent realm of space-time that may have an out-of-body component. And so that is an ecstatic state of consciousness as well. So it is the plural of stigma. It could refer to bodily marks or sores corresponding in location to the crucifixion wounds of Christ. It was first received by St. Francis, and we have an image of St. Francis receiving the stigmata from Christ as a seraph. It is important to note that the stigmata, as expressed, do some way correspond with belief. Generally is correlated with Catholics. Generally, after a specific time, we get these reports. And generally, when there were imagery of Christ crucified through the palms, that's where they happen, and then through the wrists, that's where they happen. So we understand that there is some level of conscious mechanism associated with the stigmata. And I'd love to just bring in wordplay and the irony of stigma associated with UAP reports. So the recent congressional hearing on UAPs had a kind of uniform effect. Before this, pilots were in some way, like Air Force pilots, were stigmatized in reporting the UFOs, or UAPs. So they report UAPs, then even if there isn't any official disciplinary action, there's generally this sense of, are they sane? Are they not? And so this UAP congressional hearing had an effect of removing the stigma associated with pilots reporting UAPs. Now they're saying, we're taking this seriously, please do report it. So they're removing the stigma. It's important to note that in that congressional hearing, they decided to focus explicitly on sensor data. So these reports are something that can trigger an investigation into multimodal sensor data. And that's a really valid way of exploration. But it also removes the sense of narrative or anecdotal evidence. And so in this case, with the case of stigma, the marks on the body, the mysterious marks on the body, most of the time we do not have concurrent documentation regarding the stigma. They are discovered after a sleep and dream phase, most of the time. And so in that way, the only evidence or only way of knowledge we have is the personal testimony of the person who has received the stigma. So isn't it interesting that stigma can mean these two different things, that we are actively working with this stigma associated with narrative accounts. And these narrative accounts are the only way that we can make sense of the stigma. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I understand that the synchronicity, the coincidences, and the wordplay involved really do express some deeper understanding we all share together about this phenomenon. So it is a complex phenomenon. The marks on the bodies include things like dots, glyphs, or patterns. They have scoop marks, meaning it looks like someone scooped some part of the flesh out and then it had a scar that happened overnight. There are mysterious bruises, there's scars, there's scratches, and there's a phenomenon called implants, the implantation phenomenon. So I just want to describe the phenomenon briefly. There is generally a presentation of the mark on the body that is sometimes associated with missing time UAPs and non-human intelligences. Sometimes there's dream or vague memories associated with it. There's a few cases where there is conscious memory of receiving the marks in connection with the UAPs. And generally, these marks have an ominous quality with personal significance. And this is one of the biggest characteristics of the stigma associated with missing time and UAP non-human intelligences is the ominous quality or synchronistic or personally meaningful quality associated with this. It's not just that there's a mark on the body. The person who receives the mark feels that it is personally significant. And many of the imagery that I am presenting in this presentation comes from the public internet, from Reddit or Facebook, of people saying, I had this experience, I'm not sure what it is this alien abduction? This is meaningful, this is meaningful, this is important. So it's important to recognize that the people who are reporting these things have a kind of, there's a reason why they're looking into it. Even if it turns out to be bed bugs or something like that, there is generally a meaningful quality to it in itself that invites an exploration of the mystery. So let's turn to Missing Time by Bud Hopkins, who wrote about these experiences. So what the purpose of these temporary abductions are and what part of the experience may be purely psychic, we can only guess, but that they have physical dimension seems to me beyond doubt. As we will see, several abductees bear scars on their body from incisions made years earlier when the subjects have been children. On several occasions, I have heard these witnesses under hypnosis describe it in almost exactly the same words, the equipment used to make these incisions. Although these abduction accounts include almost nothing that can be construed as deliberately hurtful or malevolent on the part of the abductors, the pattern that emerges nevertheless leaves me thoroughly alarmed. And so I would actually, in the hypothesis I'm putting forward, is that the missing time experience, the evidence or whatever, that is a kind of a waveform possibility, probability. We're not sure what happened. And in fact, there's many different parallel realities that are all intermingled in that state. Then when the abductees or the so-called abductees work with a hypnotist, that hypnotist offers a specific field of consciousness that then collapses the possibilities into one particular thing. And in that way, we might actually see consistencies across multiple witnesses because of the quality of the observational field of the hypnotist. So everyone talks about leading questions or non-leading questions. As it turns out, most communications are nonverbal in nature. We are telepathic beings. And so there's no way to be objective in these non-dual interactions between hypnotist and hypnotee. And therefore, in this hypothesis, the quantum dreaming hypothesis of missing time, we might see a sort of infinity knot sort of Mobius strip thing happening between the interactions in the past, the missing time experience, the presentation of these marks, and the hypnotist. So I would say we would actually need to explore multiple hypnotists' testimony related to these phenomenon ideally outside of different cultures, right? The hypnotist or shaman working in this case would be from different cultures. And then that's where we could get consistency that would be more meaningful than what Bud Hopkins here is reporting. Let's continue. Later on in his book, he says, a probable abduction is a sighting in which several clues suggest the likelihood of an abduction. These include the witness's awareness of a time lapse, the presence of physical marks or wounds after such a hiatus, dreams or vivid waking recollections of an abduction, again following a time lapse, and so forth. So he's just talking about the phenomenology of the missing time experience. Let's turn to David Jacques, who is one of the major proponents for the kind of negative genetic harvest, alien abduction trope. And I would say it's actually a media trope. I would say it is not a hypothesis, primarily because of the lack of credentials that David Jacques has in terms of conducting hypnosis, as well as the sort of media frenzy that has kind of brought this narrative forward. So this is generally the academic foundation for a lot of the horror show qualities of our media narratives. So in this case, let's just turn to his text describing these marks. Yeah, I could not ignore the convergence of minute details, the lack of personal content, the physical evidence of unusual scars and other marks on their bodies immediately following an abduction, the missing time lapses during the supposed abduction, the multiple abductions, and other witnesses. So these are all the details that he's using to say, hey, this abduction phenomenon is happening. It's real and it's happening. And I wouldn't disagree with that, but I would add the nuance once again that the convergence of details as discovered through the hypnotic experience of one single hypnotist is not a sufficient source of proof or evidence that the understanding put forward through the non-dual interaction of the hypnotist and hypnotee in the context of a missing time regression, that is not sufficient proof. That's not sufficient proof that anything happened. There's other proof, right? And we actually should turn to the experiencer's testimony as to what this is. And in the case of Bud Hopkins and David Jacques, they admit that most of their hypnotees assume that these are dream or dreamlike experiences from which this mysterious mark emerges. And therefore, we see that there is perhaps an unethical intervention or imposition of a worldview upon the hypnotee in these cases. Anyways, let's continue with reading from The Secret Life by David Jacques. Finally, it has been posited that the physical effects associated with abductions, the scars, internal injuries, blood loss, and gynecological and urological sequelae are a form of stigmata, very similar to the stigmata that can result in rare cases when a person is so extraordinarily obsessed with the crucifixion of Christ that he develops the wounds from it. If abduction sequelae are stigmata, however, then stigmata or other psychosomatic physical symptoms can achieve a life of their own apart from the conscious thoughts and activities of the victims. And this is a very, very important sentence, because this is a sentence that really supports the mutual enactment hypothesis. It is a sentence that really, it sounds ridiculous, right? That these psychosomatic physical symptoms can achieve a life of their own. But for many people who are studying the phenomenon now, they understand that it isn't a ridiculous hypothesis to understand that thought forms or other psychical experiences can actually take a life on their own. And in fact, this quantum dreaming hypothesis suggests that perhaps even these non-dual interactions between hypnotists and hypnotees trying to explain these marks collapses many different quantum possibilities into historic objective events in this sort of retrocausal activity, because we're dealing with multiple dimensions of time here. And so I would say that this is not an absurd proposition at this point. But let's continue with the text. For example, the abductee may have only a passing and vague concern with abductions, but she may develop marks on her body associated with them, even though she is not in any way obsessed with the subject or aware that she might be an abductee. Moreover, scars are often found by accident. A friend will notice it behind the abductee's knee, or the abductee will feel something funny on her body, then notice the mark. Thus, the physical after effects of the abductions do not conform to our knowledge about stigmata. That's totally fine. That's a really interesting point about the discovery. There's generally a story of discovery, and in fact, I've been paying attention to the red grid mark phenomenon for a year or so now, and there are very, very humorous discoveries of the marking, and there is sometimes a sense of humor associated with it. And that sense of discovery actually has a meaning component to it. Now let's turn to Dr. John Mack. He was one of the first psychiatrists to really take this phenomenon seriously. He was commissioned by the U.S. government to look into the sanity of the pilots, right, that had the stigma of reporting UAPs. And so this book, the Abduction book, comes up and out of that investigation where he took this phenomenon seriously and started to investigate it. So let's just read from it. But universal properties of the abduction experience remain. Most often, abductees everywhere are compellingly drawn towards a powerful light, often while they are driving or asleep in their bed. Invariably, they are later unable to account for a lost period of time, and they frequently bear physical and psychological scars of their experience. These range from nightmares and anxieties to chronic nervous agitation, depression, and even psychosis, to actual physical scars, puncture and incision marks, scrapes, burns, and sores. Odd rashes, cuts, scoop marks, and other lesions may appear overnight, or unexplained bleeding may occur from the nose, ear, or rectum, which by itself may not draw attention, but attains significance in association with other abduction-related phenomenon. Other symptoms which later proved to be specifically related to aspects of the abduction experience include sinus pain, urological or gynecological complaints, including unexplained difficulties during pregnancy, and persistent gastrointestinal symptoms. So now let's turn to an alternative perspective from another well-respected researcher in the field of UAPs. This is Jacques Vallee in his book Dimensions. The parallel between these modern theories and the medieval legends is closer than ever. The same theory was presented about intercourse with the elves. I have shown that fairy tales are full of stories about stealing of human babies, changelings, and abductions of both male and females for procreation with the gentry, which is a name for the fae, or the fairy folk, fair folk. Even the scars sound familiar, but Hopkins and scores of other UFOologists carefully examine UFO witnesses for unexplained scars or marks that might indicate that they were victims of abduction, perhaps one they cannot consciously recall. Throughout the Middle Ages, priests and inquisitors similarly examined the bodies of people suspected of having attended a Sabbath of witches. The proof of such supernatural contact was a scar or a mark. The authorities went to great extremes to find it and were usually successful. What normal individual doesn't have a scar whose origin is forgotten or unexplainable? Many of these alleged witches were tortured and burned at the stake. What does it all mean? Let us forget the hypothesis in the majority of cases let us forget that the hypnosis in the majority of cases has been poorly performed, even under the leadership of untrained practitioners or even of rank amateurs. Let us ignore the leading questions, the preconceptions about the answers, the extreme suggestibility of the witnesses subjected to such unscientific practices. The skeptics and the debunkers will have a field day with these obvious flaws, and for once, I agree with them. But let us not forget that these problems and let us forget these problems and take all the material at face value. Do we obtain a picture that suggests extraterrestrial contact with advanced visitors? My answer is an emphatic no. I asked earlier, what kind of spacecraft pilots are these if they still have to use maps to navigate? Now I have to ask, what kind of doctors are these who need to induce such trauma in hundreds of patients to collect a little blood or a few embryos? And so again, this is the sense of the poorly performed medical procedure yielding scars and things like that. These things seem to me to be messages. One thing I would like to consider here, right? So Jacques Vallee points out that these marks are not a modern phenomenon. And in fact, they're associated with fairies and the gentry and the elves and things like that. So this has a longer history than just UFOlogy. It was associated with witches and the supernatural. But one of the things he said I wanted to call out is the unscientific practice of hypnosis. And I would actually agree that hypnosis is not necessarily a scientific practice. We can conduct science around hypnosis. And one of the science things we have conducted is, does hypnosis lead to false memories? Yes, sometimes, right? So, another bit of science is hypnosis? Can hypnosis lead to memory enhancements? Yes, sometimes, but not all, right? So the science have told us, let's not actually convict people on evidence from hypnosis. So let's not actually build our worldview and start persecuting these different notions of negative abduction or people associated with it based on hypnotic testimony. That's not the point. And I say that's totally fine as a practicing hypnotist because I understand that the hypnosis experience is non-dual in nature. It is more like a sacrament, more like a spiritual sacrament or communion experience or a confession experience than it is a scientific method or technique to uncover historic memory. So really, we're doing violence to the nature of what hypnosis is because it is a sacrament that is best understood through the credentials of ordination, of ministerial ordination, which is why I hold the ordination in the Universal Life Church, which was easy to get, but provides a framework for offering this non-dual sacrament of communion or confession or something like that. So it's just, we don't need to worry. It's like talking about dreams being unscientific. These are experiences and we can conduct science upon experience. And so that's one of the things I would say is that the hypnosis experience is meaningful in a narrative mythological way and not necessarily in the logical way of science. So the final bit I want to talk about is Dr. Lear and implants. Dr. Lear was a podiatrist who removed, I think, somewhere between 15 and 20 implants from people who had these associations with extraterrestrial contact, missing time. He removed them, he had them analyzed, they were not from this world. So it seems as if there is this phenomena of actual implantation. This is somewhat different than stigma, stigmata, marks on the body, primarily because there is the introduction of new material within the body as opposed to a sort of leaving it within the body itself, responding to some sort of stimuli or activity. So I will just point out his work. Please do check that out. This is a related phenomena, but not necessarily within the context of marks upon the body. All right, I also want to talk about crop circles. This is very similar. This is something I'm thinking about, right? So these are mysterious marks on the earth that have certain characteristics, certain phenomenology that are understood when they are authentic, and you can tell authentic crop circles by specific characteristics like the presence of radiation, the bending pattern of the crop, the absolute complexity associated with the geometries, and things like that. So the meaning of it, there's certain things that, like, weird things happen in association with these. So these have multiple dimensions of meaning, and people are exploring these in a much deeper way to pull out and decode sort of like sigils or signs or art, decoding messages and communication. So I bring that forward by way of understanding that perhaps these marks on the body are something like crop circles. Similarly, we see people find meaning in cloud formations, like these cloud circles. There's also the opposite of what you see here, which is a hole in the clouds. There's these things called lenticular clouds, which have a sort of, people see them as like UFO motherships hidden away. But this is, again, anomalous marking of the Earth for the purpose of something like communication. I'm not saying that on an objective level that these cloud experiences are anything besides strange phenomena. I'm saying that people see them as meaningful. And in the same way, we can see these marks on the body as meaningful, even if they are bedbug bites, right? I'm not saying that all of these are. I'm saying that there is a component of meaningfulness. And in fact, with a lenticular cloud experience, many people will report, oh, if you're not a meditator or whatever, you might not actually see any of it. So there is this sort of quantum quality to it, as well as psionic quality, that we need to start talking about, because that actually is the stigma of the narrative accounts. They're so strange. That's why the US government doesn't want to deal with these accounts. It's because they're so strange. But that's the stigma. So we're talking about stigma here. All right. There's many, many dimensions to this experience. Like I said, there are spectrums of possibility. There is an association with UAP and non-human intelligences. What this is, we don't know. This can be alien abduction. This can be different types of beings. This can be Fae, this can be Christ. There's something happening here that is associated with non-human intelligences, that is in some way associated with unidentified aerial phenomena. Right? There is an association with missing time, and there is a spectrum of possibility here. Do you remember it or not, right? Like, it's associated with, oh, did you just discover it upon waking, or did you have a missing time experience that's like a waking missing time experience, or it's just coming from night and you deduce you had a missing time experience? So again, a spectrum of possibility. Same thing with conscious recall of the marking. Not a lot of people have conscious recall, but they may have more conscious recall of the experiences or not. Sometimes it goes, it's so conscious, you have conscious recall. On the other side, there's no recall, and then again, there is this sense of like hypnotic testimony enhances the conscious recall of the event. So there's a spectrum of possibility here too. And then the impact of the markings range from dots to apparent post-surgical effects, such as like missing organs or miraculous healing. So that's really important to know. It's not just marks on the body. There's a lot more to it. There's many dimensions of causation. So there is like the physical mechanic dimension of how this actually works. Like, so are there little grays that come, take your body, perform medical experiments on them? That's one hypothesis put forward by David Jacques. Another hypothesis put forward by Jacques Vallee is that the Fae or are these sort of intrapsychic, interdimensional beings that have interacted with humans, again, taking the body, leaving marks in magical ways. There's another hypothesis of the secret space program, that somehow these marks are secret space program marks, right? And another level, so regardless of the physical mechanism, and I'm not necessarily interested in that physical mechanism in the quantum dreaming hypothesis of missing time, that is understood through all of that physical mechanism is understood through the lens of the mutual enactment hypothesis put forward by Sean Esborn Hargens, where it says all of these can mutually enact together, right? So I'm talking now about the consciousness mechanism. So here in the quantum dreaming hypothesis, we see that life is a dream. It responds to intention and it unfolds in narrative ways. So one of the things that we might look to is how this marking can impact your life in a narrative way, meaning we might understand this to be an invitation to the unknown. It's a sort of mark. This is the theory of wow as put forward by Grant Cameron, right? So there's something here that is moving you forward, right? There's also levels of causation talking about teleological causes, like why are they doing this, right? So some people say it's genetic harvest, some people say it's a journey of awakenment, and then it might be something like crop circles, right? So there's all of these spectrums of possibility, there's levels of causation, and we need to get clear when we talk about what is causing this, because at one level, it can definitely be the nefarious grays that are stealing your organs, that are causing the trauma. But at another level, it is you yourself causing this because you yourself are the consciousness of this universe and you're responding to your own intentions to awaken to the deeper reality of this dreamlike experience, right? So that's really important to know. So let's not get hung up necessarily on the traumas associated with a so-called abduction event. And let's actually drop down one layer of causation to start examining this at a deeper level. All right, so now we're going to get into examples of the phenomenon. Here we are showing pictures, and you may just want to listen to this if you get creeped out by imagery of the body. So here we have the red grid mark phenomenon. We're starting with this phenomenon because it is clearly mysterious, clearly intentional, clearly intelligent, but still mysterious, and has been associated with missing time or non-human intelligences and other hypotheses. And I will say that in other hypotheses. So I have worked with a couple people with this in regression hypnosis, and it's very fascinating. One has put forward the understanding that it is gray aliens that have conducted this as a medical procedure or something like that. Another person understands this to be a paranormal source, a source of guidance in some way. And so here you see the red grid markings. Generally, it is a grid. Generally, it looks like a burn pattern. Generally, it doesn't hurt. But here you see a wide variety of the shapes and sizes of the grid marks, as well as sometimes there's patterns of the grid mark there. So I'll read from the website Experiential Dreaming, who conducted an inquiry into this phenomenon in 2013 or thereabouts. And there are some physical symptoms and circumstances reported. It's like a series of evenly spaced dots. They discover the marks mostly from awakening from sleep. They appear all over. They have no apparent source. They are typically aligned in diagonal rows. Each dot ranges from a little more than pinpricks to 2 centimeters. Entire pattern can be 1 to 6 inches so far. They remain visible for days. The area is not raised or indented. The markings appear to be subdermal. No recollection of pressure, tingling, pinching, or anything that would have drawn their attention to the site while it was produced. There are recollections of vivid, bizarre dreams, and there's some other characteristics, but let's move on to the survey conducted by the Red Grid Mark experiencers and researchers Facebook group, and they have maybe about 150 respondents to this survey, asking about related events to the phenomenon. And so 55 people responded they haven't had any odd phenomenon. 20 said sleeplessness. 51 said unusually odd or vivid dreams. 9 people said sleep paralysis. 13 said ringing in the ears. There's dizziness. 11 said loss of time associated with it. And this is something like 5% of the sample size. And then same thing with trance or hypnotic states, that there was something associated with that. It is important to know that only 3 people report ET abduction, 7 people report contact with supernatural beings, 14 report extra-dimensional travel, and 18 report nightmares. So here is a similar historic case to the red grid mark phenomenon. This is very, very similar to the red grid mark because you see red grid marks, but this took place in 1967 it's known as the Falcon Lake incident, and it was the understanding here. I'll just read the description we have. It was about 9 inches high by 6 inches wide, contained a uniform pattern of round holes, each about 1/16 inch in 1/16 inch in diameter. A blast of hot gas shot from these holes onto his chest, and they were describing UFO craft, a UAP, setting his shirt and undershirt on fire, causing him severe pain. He tore off his burning garments and threw them onto the ground. He looked up in time to see the craft depart like the first and felt a rush of air as it ascended. So this is a description of the events this man, Stephen Michalak, experienced in seeing this actually like landed UFO craft, and he received this mark. This is a burn mark. This is not characteristic of the red grid mark phenomena, but it is too similar to pass up. So let's talk about scoop marks. That's another one that's very much associated with abduction. David Jacques writes about them during the examination, and this is from a sort of constructed theory about what the abduction experience is like. So during the examination, on the legs and the knees, the small beings might make a painless incision in the calf, thighs, back of the knee, or arm. The incision may be in the form of a scoop or a long, thin cut or a wide or messy cut. The abductee usually reports no blood and no prolonged healing process. A scar forms almost instantaneously. The subject may be vaguely aware of what the aliens are doing at the time, but after the abduction, she does not remember how she got the mysterious scar. And so here we have two, in the lower left, we have 2 images of scoop marks that were used by Bud Hopkins as evidence for his theories. And then on the right, we have a pattern of 2 triangles of scoop marks from an experiencer on the internet. We've got now triangle dots. This is another phenomenon that is commonly associated with alien abduction, is a triangle of dots. Again, this is important to know that triangles of dots are also associated with bedbug bites. bed bug bites, and we'll see images of that. But these images are found from inquiries regarding ET contact or alien abduction. We've got dots in a line. So here are 3 images of dots in a line. The bottom left image is the image of Stan Romanak. This has been offered as evidence for, this was a mysterious healing, actually. So he had a busted knee, had an abduction experience, and then it worked. His knee worked again, but he had these dots in a line. And the top dot in a line pattern was, again, asked about in the context of alien abduction, and the bottom right image is my own calf, and I'll be talking about this experience shortly. The next experience I'd like to point out is strange bruises. Here are 3 images of different types of bruises associated with or inquired about in the context of alien abduction. So it's a particularized bruise mark, sometimes these weird larger bruise marks, and then there are this kind of like hard to see bruise marks. Some people see them as alien handprints, and I think there's an example coming up shortly. In addition, there's unexplained scratches. Again, these are taken from inquiries about scratch marks in connection with abduction. Most of these images come from Facebook or Reddit saying, was I abducted last night? Here's the scar, or here's the scratch. Most people do not remember anything that happened associated with it. But again, I'm just showing some of the mysterious marks people associate with it. Here are geometric bruises. So these are similar to the unexplained bruises, but we have an example of a triangle bruise. We have an example of a bruise with six bruises in a circumference, in the middle of which there's kind of this bruise mark. I believe this image is associated with the understanding that there is an implant placed in the center right there. And then the bottom left image is what is typically understood to be an alien handprint. So these are like indications. There's a hand here for an example, and say, hey, it's not that hand, right? It's not a human hand. Sometimes there's only 3 fingers or something like that, something strange. Here's the slides of other marks so that have been associated. Top left, we have this very geometric image that seems almost etched into the skin. Top right, we have something like a hive or a scratch. Bottom left, there is this square and triangle glyph. This is a phenomenon in its own right, this sort of glyph marking, a sort of branding experience, although it is difficult for me to find photographs of that. I think primarily because these glyphs are associated with my lab style abduction. So this is the theory that there is a secret space program, or the dark state has alien reproduction vehicles, and they follow up from actual ET abductions, and then in some way they are tracking these individuals, and these battalions of soldiers in alien reproduction vehicles are abducting people and leaving their brands on there. I would actually tend to say that that is one hypothesis that is active in terms of the community of people sharing this, and therefore requires more investigation to speak about. In the bottom right, we have 2 different marks. These are like singular marks. The only reason why they're meaningful here is someone felt that the symmetry indicated some sort of intelligent intervention. All right, so now let's talk about what are not mysterious marks, because that's important to know. This is a toxic caterpillar bite that has sometimes been the explanation of the red grid mark phenomena. As you can see, it's clearly not the same phenomenon, but is also mysterious if you didn't know the cause. Here is a tick bite rash. So again, this is this sort of circular pattern, this sort of red experience. Again, in most of these, you can feel a sense of agitation or something not being quite right in the skin. Here we've got bed bugs. So this is really interesting. We've got triangle dots. We've got dots in a line. You can see that the sense of agitation here, that it is, these are taken from bed bug diagnostic websites. So again, it's mysterious, but it is a cause that is bed bugs. Again, here is a ringworm. This has also been kind of misunderstood as experience. Sometimes these can form kind of glyph-like expressions as well, so that's important to know about. We've got a cherry angioma, again, a mysterious mark. Sometimes these are showing up in patterns, sometimes these are blood blisters, but these are kind of understood medical experiences. We've got a herpes rash, which again has been sort of explained or offered as an explanation for some of these mysterious marks, shingles. And then now we have images of kittens. Kittens are definitely not abduction marks, but we are over and done with our images of marks on the body and disgusting marks on the body. So I thought it would be nice to cleanse our palate before continuing on by looking at these cute little kittens, just because it was quite a journey putting together this presentation. And so we need some joy and love and just cuteness. So take a moment, look at these little cute kittens, and cleanse the palate of your eyes. So I'd like to put forward a new hypothesis and talk about a new hypothesis here. And this is the quantum dreaming hypothesis of missing time and hypnosis. So one of the implications here is that the missing time and the hypnotic regression may not actually deal with memory or historic events directly. There is a sort of almost paradoxical, almost mysterious way of kind of infinity looping, sort of, we get to time travel paradoxes really quick when we think about it. The basic understanding is that the missing time experience is something like a wave. We use the quantum metaphor and rely on the double slit light experiment and the observer principle to understand these things. So the metaphor is that missing time is like the wave form of light, and that the memory or the interpretation of a mark is like a particle. And so it collapses a possibility, this infinite possibility, quantum possibility, into historic objective expression, like a particle. And so the experience of the hypnosis, or I'm suggesting now that the mark on the body actually collapses some of the expanded, it causes an expanded state of observation, which then collapses these quantum possibilities from wave to particle form. And therefore, when we work with hypnotists to understand the nature of these marks, they may actually be presenting or collapsing a wide range of possibilities into a single historic and objective fact-based narrative. So in that way, the hypothesis here is that David Jacques, in some way, in working with his clients, have presented this historic worldview, this historically and objectively based worldview about little gray aliens. They may actually be, in some way, shape, or form, by way of the mutual enactment hypothesis, actually generating that experience retrocausally. So part of this hypothesis is that there are many different levels of causation. So quantum dreaming only deals with one level of causation, and that's really the dream or spirit level. And so in that way, we understand that the marking on the body might be a dream sign. And that you need that for some reason. It's like a dream message. It's an invitation into the unknown, that sort of thing. And that as you explore that and as you generate interpretation and as you look at the mark itself, it's shifting your worldview into something. And that then enacts into historical and objective and consensus reality by way of the mutual enactment hypothesis. So whatever makes sense to you is acting out, and that might be the secret space program, that might be genetic harvest, that might be something like mysterious stigmata. We're not quite sure. And so, like I said, this whole thing may present itself as a sort of infinity knot time travel paradox type experience. I'm not clear on how all these pieces fit together. And I don't know actually if that's the point of any of these marks. So up until now, right, like up until probably actually Dolores Cannon, she was okay with being in the state of unknown, John Mack as well. But many of the other hypnotists really wanted to have a historic objective understanding and were not comfortable actually being in the space of unknowingness, right? So in this way, that yearning for an historical and objective interpretation may actually be doing violence to the phenomenon. We're understanding this more in non-dual ways. And so mystery actually may be an essential component of the phenomenon. We may never actually find a satisfactory historic or objective explanation of the phenomenon. However, exploring that, going on whatever investigation, even if it is historical, even if you want an objective explanation, actually may lead you onto this dreamlike journey that causes you to wake up to the deeper reality of your experience in a way that you may actually wake up to a deeper reality that can encompass, a reality of yourself that can encompass all of these different strange phenomena, right? Another implication of this hypothesis is that it may not essentially be related to alien abduction, although that could be a component. So alien abduction extraterrestrial hypothesis is one of 10 hypotheses associated with the mutual enactment hypothesis. In my own case, in exploring the red grid mark as a hypnotist, I found several different explanations that the experiencers believed in themselves that were somewhat contradictory. And then I'm going to relate a personal story shortly around this. It may be seen actually as an invitation to explore the unknown. Oftentimes these missing time experiences do have a quality of like, this just doesn't make sense, or how is that even possible, or something like that. So it's like, how is it possible that these highly advanced creatures could leave such obvious marks if they've gone through such effort to hide some of the photographic or visual evidence, right? Like, how are they leaving these marks, right? So that question actually drives you forward. This might be like an oracle. This might be an invitation. This might be your letter to Hogwarts, something like that. So the quantum dreaming hypothesis puts forward we're in a consciousness-based universe, that it is actually narrative and story-based as opposed to objective at some level. Marks may actually have personal significance to drive you forward into this exploration, the shifting of your worldviews, this journey into the unknown. And so in some ways, you may actually have experienced objectively a bug bite, but it may have subjective meaning through synchronicity for you. And that might be actually my case. But that it drives you forward into this greater dreaming together with the world. So I want to talk about my own story because that's why I am presenting this material here and now. It's actually 11:11 as I write this or talk about this right now, so that's a meaningful number to me. But I grew up with a history of abduction suspicions. I had a number of experiences that I now understand to be something like abduction, but actually something much more than abduction. And I actually feel as if the media narratives surrounding alien abduction has done violence to me, and that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about it. Because when I was a kid, these experiences happened, right? They impacted me. I sought for understanding of these experiences, and the theories I encountered were that evil extraterrestrial beings could secretly come into my life, take my body, perform medical experiments on me, and put me back into my body. And it was so creepy. It took me years or decades to look into it. And so I looked for marks on my body and never actually found them. When I started doing focus my hypnosis practice on ET contact, I also started working with the red grid mark phenomena experiencers and researchers group. It was just fascinating, and I would offer a perspective because there is a strong dream component to it. I would often invite people into just sharing their dreams or talking about their dreams. And a few of the experiencers have worked with me in terms of regression. I got to the point with red grid mark that I realized that there was intelligence behind it, there was humor behind it, there's information, there is geometric patterns. It's something that needs to be looked at. And so I realized I'm not actually afraid of the mark makers. And so I offered an invitation to the red grid mark phenomena mark makers to work with me if they were benevolent, if they worked according to the principle of non-harm, if it was beneficial to do so as a sort of CE5. I recorded my permission and consent and invitation as a video, and then I sort of forgot about it. That was about 2 months ago. So then I wrote the draft of this book, which is called Missing Time Found. This is another chapter of it that I'm dictating here and now. But I thought I finished it. I thought I finished all the theory and review chapters. And I felt so good. I went to bed that night, and I just said, I'm done. I'm done with what this huge mission, this sort of decade-long kind of mysterious journey. I'm not done with the book, but I'm done with bringing in knowledge and understanding about it. Went to bed. I woke up the next day. I've had this series of lucid dreams. 3 days before that, I was having a lucid dream with a turtle, a huge turtle, and it was like, it just said, "You're in a lucid dream." The next day, I was in a lucid dream, and I wrote most of the chapters that I recorded about missing time. So that's the phenomenology and evidence, that's the quantum metaphor, and that's the quantum dreaming hypothesis. Those chapters I wrote in the lucid dream. I made the slides and then recorded as soon as possible afterwards. Those are the ones that I said, "Oh, I'm done with this. How wonderful." And so then the next day, in the day where I received this mark, I had this dream, this lucid dream, and it actually wasn't, I don't remember the lucid dream. I remember coming back from the lucid dream. I had consciousness of, I had a lucid dream. And I remember going, I don't need to remember it. I don't need to record it. And I didn't. And then later that day, I said, "Oh, how wonderful! I'm going to take a sauna. I'm going to just celebrate that I'm completed with this missing time book. I'm going to celebrate that, completed with a draft. I have a lot more work to do, but celebrate this sort of getting over the hill with it." And I took a sauna and I went down to meditate, just to be with myself with that. And I looked down and I saw this marking on my leg, and I said, "Oh my God, this is the red grid mark." And it wasn't. It clearly wasn't. You can clearly tell it's not red grid mark because it's not a grid. The markings itself are not subcutaneous. They're through the layers of skin. So there's sort of this puncture quality to it. It was significant to me because that invitation for the red grid mark, I said, please do it in reference to this tattoo actually on my chest, sort of out of ego, because I really wanted the ETs to support my Enochian practice that is put forward with the Book of Galactic Light. That was my egoic desire. But this mark actually is on my calf. It is directly opposite to a tattoo I have. I'm looking to see if I can show you the tattoo, but I'll actually just draw it out if I find a pen. Just give me a second. right? So it's on my right calf instead of my left calf. My left calf has the tattoo, and the tattoo itself is composed of three dots like that. There is the devil and Christ and a clock, right? This and that forms an image of ellipses, and that kind of shows a sense of indefinitivity. This is a conception, a sigil I made for a relationship to time. The clock is 3 o'clock. That's when Christ died on the cross. And there's an infinity symbol associated with that right there, right? So then that was the tattoo on my leg. That's directly opposite this symbol, right? And then there's also this sense of I got it covered up to be a kind of double dorje, which is a Buddhist symbol, and so it's sort of like that image. So that's the tattoo. This is the mark directly opposite to this. When I was sitting down with this, it looks to me, it spoke to me of the double slit light experiment as well. It looked like the double slit light experiment. And as I noticed it, a few things happened in my consciousness. I had a memory that wasn't a memory of playing with the wordplay, stigma and stigmata and stigmatized associated with this. So it seemed as if it was a future memory of this presentation, actually. It's like I did slides about it. I remember doing slides. I remember talking about stigma. That memory came up. And that's why I'm doing this work right now. So this infinity knot experience is happening, right? The other thing I remember was this sense of it kind of felt like a scratching experience. I had this memory of it's an image of sort of like standing by my own calf, putting a needle through it, sort of scratching it, like I'm at a table or something, working on myself. And so that's the image associated with it as well. And so that's when I started thinking, what happened that night? And I said, oh my God, I had this, all I remember is being in this kind of dark hallway with some light somewhere going, I was lucid. I don't need to remember and record this. And so I said, this is such a strong message to me. This is a message to me. This is potent to me. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, to find out that this image, the cause of this is actually a bed bug. Well, no, it's not a bed bug. I mean, my wife sleeps there. My baby sleeps there. It's like no one else has this experience. It's not itchy. It's not raised. It's healing well. It has a significance to it. It's meaningful as just, it felt uncanny to me when I discovered it, primarily because of the strong meaning associated with time. And I go, oh my God, I invited them to make a mark in reference to a tattoo. And it's like, I put forward a quantum dreaming hypothesis, and this is what shows up, the next day. I've spent 37 years looking for so-called abduction marks, and this is it. It's sort of almost like they're laughing at me a little bit, and I'm laughing with me. That's the sort of thing I would invite to understand. So that's why I'm doing this. I don't have a full understanding about this yet, but the sense is like, oh, I need to actually include this chapter here because of the wordplay around stigma, stigmatized, because these are actually physicalized expressions. This says, hey, something mysterious is actually happening, and it has physical components to it. And I'm saying my testimony is like there's a much greater psychic component to it. There's a much greater synchronistic narrative-based component to it. Like literally I finished a book, or so I thought, in terms of the material. And then this shows up. And then it's sort of this sense of invitation for more. And so I'm offering that as testimony, saying, I don't know what this is. I don't know how it happened. But isn't it amazing? Isn't it a sign that something is relevant here? So, like I said, I am putting together a book. I think it will be called missing time found. Don't worry, it's just a dream. Covering theories about, we'll have about 6 or 7 theory chapters. We'll have a review of the evidence of missing time. I want to include the extraordinary stories interviews I did with Preston Dennett, a storyteller in this field, Ray Hernandez, a researcher who put together the free survey put forward in the Beyond UFO book, and Candace Grahl-Goldman, who's a hypnotist. And I asked them all about how do we relate to extraordinary stories, particularly hypnosis and hypnosis and dreams related to missing time. So those are interesting perspectives. And then I'm offering a section on practice, how to do practice in this non-dual way that doesn't assume there's a historical correlate. So what does it actually look like to do missing time regression from the perspective that historical objective facts are not necessarily the point of it. I have case studies, probably around 14 will be included. And then finally, I will conclude with epistemology, ethics, and etiquette surrounding this topic. If you are interested in missing time, if you have an interesting case you'd like to share, if you have a theory or a review chapter or something like that you want to collaborate on, or if you'd like to explore working with me in hypnosis or dream work, please do get in touch with me at daniel@cosmicdreamsanctuary.org. You can just go to the website, cosmicdreamsanctuary.org, and schedule time, a consultation. They're always free and no obligation. All of my work this way unfolds through donation that I ask for after the fact, and you can put in what you want. So I just wanted to let you know that. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Here is an image of the Earth. This is from Earthrise. This is taken from the moon. And it was a very potent image because it allowed for our whole society to see ourselves from a different perspective. And that's what a lot of these experiences are inviting you to do, is to journey into the unknown in this way. And these marks on the bodies invite you to journey into perhaps an unknown worldview that's much more expansive. There's components of just spiritual ecstasy, actually, in this journey to look back on ourselves. And to look back on ourselves. And so that's sort of what I'm inviting you to do. And I just want to say thank you for going on this journey. Marks on the body are uncomfortable in general. Some of the images we saw are uncomfortable, but some of them actually have mysterious causes that reveal to us that our worldview is not what we think it is. And when we look to the actual evidence as to the impact of these experiences, they seem to be calling us to wake up into greater stewardship of the earth. They invite us to step outside of objectivity, right? So one of the practices here is maybe to look at the practice of relating to the mysterious mark on the body and not wanting to collapse it down into a historic understanding. So I'm inviting you to do that now, because if you practice that with a mark on your body and you go, okay, I have this mark on the body, or someone else has this mysterious mark, I really want to know what it is, I really want to objectify it. But if you don't, and if you practice mindfulness in that state, you may actually develop the capacity to relate to the earth in a way that is non-objectifying. So when we objectify the earth, we extract resources, we don't care about it, it's always in service to ourselves. But when we stop objectifying it and we relate to it in this non-dual way, we can see ourselves actually as expressions of earth consciousness and part of this vaster system, which actually is in touch with subtle realms, with the fairy realms, with extraterrestrial realms. There's all this stuff that's connected, and that's what it'll lead us to. But we actually need to practice not objectifying the earth. Right? We need to practice not collapsing down into the polarity of good, bad, light, dark, self-other, subject, object, right? This happened, this didn't happen. We need to practice being in this sort of quantum dreaming state, because when we are able to do that, we will be able to relate to the messages of the earth in kind ways, in the guidance of the earth. We may actually be able to be led by the earth herself into harmony and balance in ways that seem miraculous to us. So once again, thank you for going on this journey.